Jacques already said, Tsai Ing-wen has been had a very pro-U.S. policy, and clearly she has not been, the goal of her administration has not been to balance between Beijing and Washington, but to strengthen the relationship with Washington. That makes a lot of sense, I think. I'm sure if you're sitting in Taipei and you watched, though, I mean, Tsai's got to be worried about the Beijing-Washington relationship, because just as it is bad for Taiwan if things get too good, it's also bad if they get too bad between Washington and Beijing. And there's, frankly, the risk of both of those. Our president is charmingly able to hold two ideas like that in his mind at the same time. So you could see, even as the system, the bureaucracy is sort of gearing up for a much more tense U.S.-China relationship, you could very easily see the president making a decision based on short-term tactical decisions on a trade issue or some other issue with Beijing, that he looks at Taiwan and says, this isn't in American interest, and very quickly make a decision that would be have long-term implications for Taiwan's security. And I'm sure Tsai Ing-wen and her advisors looked at what happened in Syria, looked at what happened with the Kurds, and with real foreboding that that what does that hold for us in Taiwan?
Let's say you were one of Tsai's advisors. What advice would you give her in terms of dealing with China and the U.S. and all of that to whoever, David?
So I'll start, and I will start away from the U.S. or China. There was the go south policy. There was the okay, really go south policy. The please go south. I mean, Taiwan for a long, long time has been trying to diversify its economy away from its reliance on the mainland, until Taiwan figures out a way to make that happen, we're going to be back where we are, where Taiwan feels exquisitely vulnerable to not only political or security influence from the mainland, but just plain old economic influence. And that's easy to offer the advice is that you've got to figure out a way to make that happen, but I think it's going to be a really important element. The other element, while I'm on economics, is to take a look at the U.S. Trade relationship. If you look at the U.S.-China deal that was signed just yesterday, particularly on agricultural issues, which mean an awful lot to the current president and his supporters, it has the potential, and I say potential because I don't think it's a done deal, but it has the potential to clear away a lot of really problematic agricultural issues between the United States and China, issues that are still there between the United States and Taiwan. For 2 years back when cross-strait issues weren't an issue, and I was at AIT in Taiwan, we dealt every day with ractopamine and pork. And it will be really awkward if it's easier to export American pork to the mainland than it is to Taiwan. Issues like that I think President Tsai really needs to take a look at and make sure that she shores up that aspect of the relationship, one that matters a lot to the President Trump.
Jacques or Vincent, do you have advice for President Tsai?
I think Taiwan is particularly after this democratic election, is in relatively good shape. However, it's not without concern. So obviously, if I were consulted, I would probably advise not to overinterpret the mandate, and that if on the one hand, Taiwan would take delight in the fact that the United States now has a more robust and tougher policy toward China, especially if this is multilateral, then the value of Taiwan is likely to increase in the Indo-Pacific. But just as David mentioned, that at some point, if the U.S. policy should shift, then Washington is going to distinguish between primary and secondary interests. I don't think Taiwan will rise to the primary interest. So I don't think it's wise for Tsai Ing-wen administration to not try to make any effort to maintain a working, at least a working relationship with mainland China. There are a few very practical issues coming up. So for example, this year we'll mark the 10th anniversary of the ECFA, Economic Cooperation Framework, which was of course the highlight of sort of the reconciliation policy of the Ma administration. Is there a need to actively cancel that, or is there some, or both sides are going to renew it, or both sides are just determined to let it drift? There are also 21 other agreements signed under the auspices of cross-trade framework. So I think the coming month will give test to whether the DPP has a withdrawal to develop a working relationship with the mainland. Since they didn't like the 1992 consensus, and the Chinese have never totally ruled out the possibility of developing another consensus with the DPP. They now probably very reluctantly admit that the 1992 consensus was with the KMT, when the KMT was a ruling party. Then perhaps there could be another consensus, 2020 consensus, whatever that is.
Shelley, do you have anything to add on that topic?